At our number 10 spot, we have the Sinaloa cartel. This one I had to mention first because this is the most notorious and one of the largest drug trafficking organizations in the entire world. The Sinaloa cartel was founded in 1989 by Mexican smugglers Hector Salazar, Juan Moreno, and the more famous Joaquin Lora, otherwise known as El Chapo. Their drug operations were so international that El Chapo was once ranked as one of the richest men in the world with an estimated net worth of $26 billion. This cartel group would eventually have the largest smuggling operation to the US with several different narcotics. To join the group, you would either need to be related to another member or be married to one. But once you're in the group, you would have to be on a constant watch for other rival gangs, as the Sinaloa cartel engages in many turf wars. For example, in 2012, they had a bloody bout with the Juarez cartel over some territory. More recently, in 2022, a Sinaloa leader took the lives of some priests and US tourists, making them feared internationally still. Regardless of El Chapo's imprisonment, this drug cartel group remains Mexico's most dominant drug cartel. At our number 9 spot, we have the Jalisco New Generation. This is one of the youngest cartel groups on this list, but don't let that deceive you from the fact that they are also considered to be one of, if not the most powerful and violent cartel in Mexico today. This group first emerged after former Sinaloa cartel Ignacio Coronel, aka Nacho, was killed by Mexican security forces in 2010. So prior to his passing, he gave his orders to the leader of the Millennial cartel, El Lobo, which were to move a load of drug shipments and manage finances. The name Jalisco is from the place where they operated from. This group is just known for their violent behavior. The group claimed they have committed a massacre in 2011 which involved 35 people in Veracruz, Mexico. And in more recent news, the group has uploaded videos online where new members were forced to eat the body parts of their enemies. So they're one of the more dangerous cartels on this list. At number 8 spot, we have the Beltran Leyva organization. This Mexican cartel was founded by 4 brothers, Marcos, Carlos, Alfredo, and Hector, all under the last name of Beltran Leyva. They actually served in the Sinaloa area and acted as extra security and enforcers for their cousin El Chapo. They would later relocate into the Gulf cartel territory after the leader had been arrested in 2003. At this point, they had many bouts with the Gulf cartel, who were accompanied by the Zetas, who were these soldiers recruited straight out of the Mexican military. When their commander Alfredo was apprehended based on the information supplied by El Chapo, it triggered them and the BLO split from the Sinaloa cartel. And instead, they joined their former rivals, the Zetas. War then started with El Chapo's son, Edgar Guzman, being the first victim, being shot to death in a shopping mall in Sinaloa. One by one, the brothers of BLO were being arrested, kidnapped, or even assassinated. This loss of leaders and alliances would cause the end of this group in 2017. At our number 7 spot, we have the Gulf cartel. We just mentioned this earlier, so let me give you guys a bit of the inside of them. This cartel is one of the country's oldest operating drug cartels. It was originally founded by Juan Guerrero in 1920s. Juan would smuggle alcohol in the US as the prohibition was in full effect. Except when this ended, he took up the challenge of smuggling narcotics to taunt other cartels. Then after he passed away, his nephew Garcia Abrego took over and made this group into something bigger. He would deal with various cartel groups to increase his power and influence in the area. He would later be pulling in billions after he would handle narcotic shipments through the borders, taking all sorts of risk in the process. Well, this caught up to him because in January 1996, he was arrested and transported to the US. The cartel even had to send billions of dollars to him using suitcases, jets, and through underground tunnels. This cartel still sticks around to this, but has lost a lot of former territory due to rival gangs. At number 6 spot, we have the Los Zetas cartel. On this list, we have some of the most evil cartels, but the Los Zeta cartel takes the whole cake. The Los Zeta cartel was originally founded in 1997 and were made up of Mexican military deserters, with many of them specializing in combat. This group was notorious for their extremely violent tactics and strict relationship between one another. Even the US Drug Enforcement Administration, or the DEA, described them as, quote, the most technically advanced and sophisticated and violent of these groups. After its original use in the Gulf cartel, they broke away in the mid-2000s and continued their drug smuggling and brutal executions. They were known for constant beheading and torture videos as they tried to strike fear into the eyes of their rivals. They really just didn't care about human life, and they also caused a lot of political and police corruption whichever place they resided in. Right in the hump bar list, we have the Guerreros Unidos. In 2010, 2 groups of the La Familia cartel joined and formed an alliance with various cartels, giving rise to the Guerrero Unidos. One group decided to support Juarez, Tijuana, and the Los Zeta cartels. Then a second group decided to form partnerships with the Gulf and Sinaloa cartels. The group that sided with the Gulf and Sinaloa cartels would then form this GU group. In 2014, this cartel kidnapped 43 students from a college in Guerrero. Their influence was so strong they managed to get Mexican soldiers to interrogate these students only to send them off to the cartel members. The GU's violent tactics and use of kidnapping as a source of revenue made them a target of both national and state security forces. The group has lost several leaders and dozens of members as a result of these security operations. On top of that, this group also controls all sorts of government positions with constant bribes and the fear they instill on Mexican citizens. At a number 4 spot, we have the Heinous cartel. This cartel was created in 1989 when smugglers had left the rival cartel, the Guadalajara. This group centers themselves of the profit from drug smuggling, but recently they have ventured into other criminal activities such as kidnapping for ransom money, human trafficking, and extortion. It wasn't until the group was under leader Carrillo Fuentes where they started to grow very quickly. Their operations went from local to Central America into South America, including Argentina and Chile. They would use commercial and parcel air flights to smuggle in narcotics, which would later coin him the name Lord of the Skies. To this day, the Juarez cartel is battling with rival groups, barely clinging onto their territory. In November 2019, this cartel was linked to a brutal massacre of 9 dual US-Mexican citizens very close to the border. At number 3 spot, we have the La Familia cartel. The La Familia cartel first emerged in the 1980s as an anti-crime group, but as turf wars were happening everywhere at once, they got dragged into the Gulf cartel and Zeta issues. Oddly enough, this group opposed the use of narcotics at first. I mean, their second leader, Moreno Gonzalez, apparently had his soldiers carry around Bibles and conduct prayer sessions before work. So maybe this group wasn't all bad. Well, this was until they discovered how profitable narcotics are. So over time, they found locations to grow their array of narcotics to distribute. Now they're Mexico's largest producer and exporter of methamphetamines and is racking up millions of dollars for this. At number 2 spot, we have the Tijuana or the Orellano Felix cartel. The Orellano Felix cartel, or the AFO, often referred to as the Tijuana cartel, is one of the most powerful and aggressive drug trafficking organizations operating from Mexico. The Orellano family is composed of 7 brothers and 4 sisters. Ramon is considered the most violent brother and organizes and coordinates protection details over what he exerts absolute control. In this cartel, they directly influence law enforcement and the judicial system in Mexico, as well as mass transportations of narcotics into the United States. The Tijuana cartel is presented in at least 15 Mexican states with important areas of operations in Tijuana, Mexicali, Tecate, Ensenada, and Baja California. At number 1 spot, we have the Nueva Plaza cartel. The state of Jalisco is home to the Nueva Plaza cartel as well, also known as the Cartel Nueva Plaza. Enrique Sanchez Martinez, aka El Cholo, and Eric Valencia Salazar, aka L55, were charged in the organization when it first formed as a breakaway faction of the Jalisco New Generation cartel. This cartel started in 2018 and was financially supported by the Sinaloa cartel, and this caused many fatal clashes between them and the Jalisco New Generation cartel. In March of 2021, El Cholo appeared in a video claiming he had reached a deal with Mexico City security chief Omar Garcia Harfuch to combat the Jalisco New Generation cartel. Less than 4 hours later, El Cholo was found dead, his body covered in plastic on top of a park bench in Jalisco. Among other things, this cartel specializes in money laundering, extortion, arms trafficking, making them a strong cartel among those on this list.
Starting off this countdown at number 10, NXIVM. If you thought cults were a thing of the past, think again. NXIVM had more than 18,000 followers across North America until 2017, when members came forward to expose the abusive practices of a secret society within the group. Women were recruited under the false pretense that they were joining a sisterhood of sorts, but it ended up being an intimacy cult. A pyramid scheme existed within the group, with the leader, who members called Vanguard, at the top, masters who recruited other women to the secretive group, and at the bottom were the newest recruits, who were referred to as the slaves. A former member recounted to the New York Times that in order to be admitted into the secret club, she had to give her master naked photos and other compromising documents that would be used as blackmail if she ever told anyone about the group's existence. In 2020, the leader was tried in court, where more than a dozen women came forward with statements regarding his psychological and intimate abuse. Victims were also as young as 15 years old. The leader was sentenced to life in prison, but in a court filing, his lawyers wrote he is not sorry for his conduct or his choices. Now coming in at number 9, Order of the Solar Temple. Founded in Switzerland in 1984 by Joseph D. Mambro, the Order of the Solar Temple traced its roots to the medieval Knights Templar, but also thought the world would end in the 1990s. Things Things took a turn in 1994 when Joseph reportedly ordered the execution of an infant in Quebec. Later that year, more than 50 members of the group were murdered or passed by taking their own life, and the group's buildings were destroyed by fire. Additional members then passed away by also taking their own lives in 1995 and 1997. Wildly enough, the Order of the Solar Temple still remains active today and has several hundred members. Number 8. Angel's Landing. Angel's Landing is the name of the 20-acre compound outside of Kansas, where Lou Castro and a small group of people lived an extravagant life in the early 2000s. Castro's followers were convinced that he was an angel and a seer who could look into the future and know when you were going to pass away. Local law enforcement took an active interest when a member of the Angel's Landing community tragically turned up deceased on the compound in 2003. When the member's husband passed in a freak accident in 2006, a local detective then dived into every bit of personal and financial information he could find on the people living at Angel's Landing. He found out that expensive life insurance policies were taken out on people in Castro's circle and cashed in by members when someone in the makeshift family accidentally passed away, and this pattern occurred around every 2.5 years. In 2010, Castro moved from Kansas to Tennessee and adopted a new identity, and he was soon arrested by the FBI for aggravated identity theft and fraudulent use of social security card number. He was later charged with 28 felonies, and in February 2015, he was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 80 years in prison. Number 7. Church of the Lamb of God. The Church of the Lamb of God was started by Hervé Lebaron in Mexico. Lebaron convinced his followers that he received direct instructions from God, which included using an abandoned Mormon doctrine, blood atonement, that allows the execution of sinners to cleanse them of evil. Lebaron had 51 children with 13 different wives and over 2 decades amassed hundreds of followers, who allegedly took the lives of more than 20 people on behalf of him and his orders. Mexico authorities then arrested him in 1979 and handed him over to the FBI, where he was charged and jailed for life in Utah. Number 6. Heaven's Gate. Founded by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles in the 1970s, Heaven's Gate was a cult that had a complicated belief system involving aliens, spaceships, and an intimate recycling of the planet Earth. After Bonnie passed away in 1985, Applewhite took the group to even further extremes, and in 1997, he began claiming that the spacecraft would carry the Heaven's Gate members to the next level of existence. While living in a rented home in San Diego, Applewhite and his 38 followers passed by taking their own life by taking a pill used to treat and prevent the symptoms of seizures, sedation, hypnotics, and insomnia mixed with applesauce. They all wore the same uniform and Nike shoes and had $5.75 in their pockets. As of today, the Heaven's Gate website still exists and is maintained by 2 people of the group's followers. Halfway. Number 5. Sananon. Charles Dieterich opened the infamous Sananon location in 1958. There were 3 phases to the cult over the course of its lifespan: a drug rehabilitation program, Utopia Society, and church. Hundreds of people then moved in and were charged a fee to live in the compound. People of all professions worked to give their money to the group, often doing a tremendous amount of physical labor. At one point, the cult had $33 million in assets. The rules of the cult then became stricter and the abuse became more rampant. He compiled an enemies list, which ultimately became a hit list. It included lawyer Paul Morantz, who wanted to help free families kept in the group, and had won a $300,000 judgment against the group for abducting and brainwashing a member. This enraged the leader to the point that he ordered 2 of his Imperial Marines to take a venomous rattlesnake in Paul's mailbox the following month. He was then bitten and just barely survived. Police raided the cult, and Charles was arrested in his Lake Havasu home on December 2, 1978. He was then sentenced to 5 years supervised probation, fined $5,000, and ordered to no longer run the cult. The group was then shut down forever due to its violence and tax fraud in 1991. Number 4. The Ant Hill Kids. Broach Theriault was said to have belonged to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, living a life with no unhealthy foods, drugs, or alcohol. He preached that the world would end on February 17, 1979, and formed the Ant Hill Kids. He gained a small but loyal following through his charisma and looks. While hiking, Roach, who went by Moses, claimed to have received a message from God, prompting him to start a wealthy living clinic in Quebec, so they could all be saved. He moved his followers to tents on a hill and made them build a town. He married his followers to each other to eventually void them, and later began being intimate with his followers. He then became a violent alcoholic and tortured his followers through drunken surgical procedures and cut off their limbs to prove he could heal them. He also also forced members to break their legs with sledgehammers, shoot one another's shoulder, and eat their own feces. He was then convicted of criminal negligence and spent 2 years in prison after causing the passing of a 2-year-old with a failed surgery attempt. Number 3. The Manson family. Following his prison release, longtime criminal Charles Manson decided he would leave for San Francisco to form the Manson family. Manson fit in so well with the hippie scene in the city and fed women LSD, asking them to join him. He and his 5 female followers traveled to Los Angeles, and Manson supposedly predicted an Armageddon and told his followers they should stay with him to survive. Upon listening to the Beatles' White Album, Manson felt as though the band was speaking directly to him and warning him of a race war, helter skelter. Manson saw himself as a messiah. His following grew as he drugged and intimately violated female followers. He also exploited them to recruit male followers. Manson manipulated young female followers by discouraging them from free thinking and threatening violence if they did not comply. Then on August 9, 1969, an 8-month pregnant Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Abigail Fogler, Wojciech Frykowski, and Stephen Parent were brutally executed by Manson family members. The members used Tate's blood to write "pig" on the front door. In 1971, he was then sentenced to life in prison. Number 2. Children of God. Initially called Teens for Christ, Children of God was founded in 1968 by David Berg in California. Attracting young runaways and hippies, David preached a kind of worship that combined the ways of Jesus Christ with the free love movement of the 60s. Members, who amounted to 15,000 people across the world at its peak, didn't work or go to school. The Children of God didn't believe in the nuclear family, so children were grouped together and lived separately from the parents. In the late 1970s, Children of God became notorious for the intimate practices that one of David's own daughters later described as religious prostitution. David coined the term flirty fishing, an intimate practice in which women would allegedly have intercourse with men to bring them into the cult. As he manipulated the Children of God family with his sadistic practices, members started leaving the community, including the family of actor Joaquin Phoenix, who grew up in a Children of God commune. Although David passed away in 1994 while under FBI investigation, the Children of God cult continues to exist and now goes by the name Family International. Although the group claims that the horrific practices are a thing of the past, you can watch the whole documentary called Children of God on Netflix. Now coming in at number 1, People's Temple. Jim Jones started his own congregation known as the People's Temple of the Disciplines of Christ in 1955. He proclaimed to have a vision of nuclear attack and when it would occur, causing him to move his church from Indianapolis to San Francisco. What many people didn't know is that Jones was said to have been using speed and intimately, physically, and emotionally abusing temple members. This kind of media coverage prompted Jones to convince about 1,000 of his followers to move away to Jonestown. Jonestown was a tactic to isolate followers and gain complete control, and it became a prison camp. Followers were publicly beaten, put into solitary confinement, and even put down with sedatives. On November 18, 1978, Jones was mad when he heard some members wanted to return to the States with California Congressman Leo Ryan. As Ryan was on his plane waiting to fly back to the States, he was executed as an order by Jones. Later that day, Jones ordered everyone to the pavilion. He urged everyone to drink a grape-flavored aid mixed with cyanide, tranquilizers, and sedatives. People were pressured into drinking it in fear of being shot. Those who didn't want to drink it were forcefully injected with poison. Jones was found with what was believed to be self-inflicted gunshot wound in his head, following the mass of the people that all drank the grape drink and took their lives. The Jonestown Massacre is known as one of the largest mass passings in American history, with a total of over 900 passings.
At our number 10 spot, we have Ivan the Terrible. To get a nickname like this, you already know he must have done something very bad. I mean, his name ain't Ivan the Humble. Born in 1530 to Grand Prince Vasily III of Moscow, he became an instant representative for the Rurik dynasty. It wasn't until shortly after his father would pass away, when he was only at the age of 3, causing him to take the position of Grand Prince of Moscow. 5 years later, his mother passed away, which only added more fuel into this little boy's heart. Then on January 1547, Ivan was crowned the first Tsar and Grand Prince of all of Russia. At first, he was doing very well. He improved military service, strengthened church affairs, and introduced extensive self-government. Except during these turbulent times, he was escalating his own paranoia, and his mental health would deteriorate as more issues would be piled up. In November 1581, he attacked his pregnant daughter-in-law, which caused a miscarriage. This also stirred up a famous encounter with him and his son, where he struck his own son in the head with a staff until his skull was broken, killing him. That's not all. He once blinded the architect who created the St. Basile Cathedral to ensure he would never design anything as beautiful again. During 1560 as well, Ivan's paranoia led him to believe the citizens of Novgorod were committing treason. So what did he do? He went on to massacre them, killing around 2,000 to 27,000 people. Ivan even decided to sew the Archbishop of Novgorod into a bearskin and then let dogs hunt and kill him. He also had 8 wives, but that's not so scary, kinda nice, am I right? At number 9 spot we have Vlad the Impaler, another unpleasant nickname on our list. First of all, he is responsible for the deaths of around 80,000 people, but for some historians that number pushes to around 100,000. Out of those people he apparently killed, around 20,000 of them were impaled. No wonder he got this name. Many people have him as inspiration for Dracula for his bloodthirsty ways. For example, after his family passed away, he decided to hold a banquet and invited hundreds of members of all of his rivals' families. So when he had them all over, he then all had them stabbed and their still twitching bodies were impaled on these spikes. And another time when he retreated from a battle, he ordered 20,000 defeated Ottomans to be impaled on wooden stakes. This was such a horrifying sight that when the Sultan Mehmed II saw the lines of bodies, he quickly retreated back to Constantinople. Regardless of his bloodthirsty motives, he remains a national hero in Romania. His victorious campaigns against the Ottoman forces, which protected both the Wallachia and Europe, have won him praise as a military leader. So good or bad, he did kill a lot of people, but then again, they were impaled brutally, so I don't know what to say about that one. At number 8 spot, we have Phalaris. This leader created one of history's worst torture devices of all time. The brazen bull was designed by Greek tyrant Phalaris, who reigned in ancient Greece from 5070 to 554 BC. He's most famous for his cruelty, and he would literally use the funds of his own citizens to create more torture devices. The craziest thing about his brazen bull was the fact that he asked a designer slash builder named Perillus to create it, but it was said that Phalaris used him as the first victim to be executed in it. Talk about a backstab. This torture device was a bronze bull that would basically roast victims alive, and to make things worse, before the victims were placed into the bull, they were forced to have their tongues cut out and their hands bound. As the victims burned alive, their screams would appear as if the bull was alive. At number 7 spot, we have Emperor Caligula. This guy was definitely the craziest Roman emperor I've read about. If you had a bloodthirsty tyrant and a sexual deviant, you would have Emperor Caligula. After being born in the year 12, he would go on to become Roman emperor from 37 to 41 CE. When he first took authority, it was noticeable that something terrible was wrong about him. Caligula had incestuous relations with his 3 sisters and engaged in plenty of intimate group sessions during his reign. And on top of that, he forced senators to bring their wives and their daughters to his palace, where he would convince them to do very inappropriate things for him and others in authority. Then to become a full menace, Caligula would brag about his sexual performances right in front of the husbands of the women he slept with. This guy was a player, a menace, and a ladies' man all in one. In a pursuit for wealth, he would stage trials of innocent people in order to confiscate their estates, while he gained large quantities of money and luxuries for himself. Eventually, things started to go bad. I mean, bad leader, bad place. Makes sense. However, the last straw was after famine and bankruptcy hit. It was here where he planned and moved to Egypt to live as a sun god. This eventually triggered his murder in January 41 AD. At number 6 spot, we have Joseph Stalin.
Stalin was born in 1878 and was the infamous leader for the USSR during the 1930s.
Despite their success against Germany to end the war, Stalin was far from being innocent from any war crimes himself. He is indirectly responsible for around 30 to 40 million deaths, though that number tends to hop around a lot. Out of those millions, many of them happened to be in the Soviet Union itself. For example, in 1932 and 1933, millions of Ukrainians were killed in a man-made famine, which was engineered by none other than Joseph Stalin. Then in 1936, Stalin initiated the Great Purge, aiming to rid the Communist Party of some of the biggest detractors and rivals of the group. Hundreds of thousands of people initially were arrested by Stalin's NKVD, which was the secret police at the time. Many were executed or sent to the Gulag, which, for those who don't know, were these terrible, harsh labor camps where many people would pass away. Also, he organized a series of mass executions, which totaled around 22,000 people, consisting of Polish officers and POWs. This is known as the Katyn Massacre, and it was done for the sole purpose to ruin the future of the Polish military. As I mentioned previously, he was responsible for the deaths of his own people, which is probably the worst crime he ever committed. Historians believed he killed over 20 million of his own people, making him one of the most evil rulers to ever exist on this list. In the humper list, we have Mao Zedong. This guy was terrible, but also good, depending on the way you want to look at it. To set the baselines, he created the People's Republic of China, introducing communism for the first time. This is where a lot of controversial things happen. In the purges of the early 1950s, millions of wealthy peasants, intellectuals, and saboteurs were killed. Then came the Great Leap Forward from 1958 to 1962, one of the most insane experiments in social engineering ever. Private plots were abolished and communal kitchens were introduced. This experiment turned out to be a disaster which ended up killing over 45 million Chinese people. Then in 1966 he launched the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, in which millions of people were persecuted and suffered public humiliation, imprisonment, torture, hard labor, and even execution. Except there was some good he did. Despite killing millions, I know, still terrible, Mao turned China from a third world country into a first world country with their improved international relations. As well, Mao united China together, and if we really think about it, his high death toll is because of an accident. I know, still terrible, but not as terrible. At number 4 spot we have Queen Maria I of Portugal. Born in 1734, Queen Maria exhibits some eyebrow raising behavior prior to her husband/uncle's death in 1786, but it was that sad event that really set her on the road to madness. When her eldest son and only daughter passed away as well, Maria's already fragile mental state went completely downhill. The religious fanatic became convinced she was going to hell and reported visions of her deceased father's blackened corpse being tormented by demons. Visitors to her apartment could complain that they were tired by her constant screaming and wailing. I mean, she didn't kill anyone, so that's not a terrible thing. Except in February 1792, she was deemed mentally insane and was treated by Francis Willis, the same physician who attended George III of the United Kingdom. So this is probably the least evil monarch on this list, but her mental deterioration and effects definitely made it difficult for the people at the time. At number 3 spot we have Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was Iraq's ruler from 1979 until 2003. His sick need for power, ultimate authority, no matter the cost in human blood, was a consistent theme throughout his entire reign. Saddam was well known for employing terror against his own people, including the use of mustard gas and nerve gas to subdue the Kurds. To mention some of his horrible actions, in 1980 he launched an attack on Iran. The battle ended in a stalemate with over 1 million people passing away, many including innocent women and children. Then he attacked Kuwait in 1990, igniting the first Gulf War and killing another 85,000 people. Following that war, uprisings killed around 150,000 civilians. The list goes on with the amount of attacks and other war crimes he committed on innocent people. Except in 2003 he was captured in Iraq, and then in 2006 he was famously sentenced to death by hanging. At number 2 spot we have Pol Pot. Born in 1925, Pol Pot was a political leader for the communist Khmer Rouge government that led Cambodia from 1975 to 1979. His goal was to wipe out all sorts of Western influences in Cambodia and create his own country based on his personal likings. He wanted to see Cambodia back to its roots by advocating for more grassroots farmers and laborers. This basically made educated and professional people number 1 on his hit list. One of his first decisions was to evacuate Cambodia's urban areas. This displaced millions of people, resulting in a complete life change, as many of them were forced to work in labor camps as farmers. It was pretty bad because if you refused to do this type of work, this would place you in a detention center and would give you 2 options: comply or die. The Khmer Rouge also had their own torture manual, which was used in the form of interrogation. It was said that 1.5 to 2 million Cambodians were killed during Pol Pot's rule. At a number 1 spot we have Genghis Khan. What did you expect? So he takes our number 1 spot for the most obvious reasons ever. He is responsible for the deaths of over 40 million people. Genghis Khan of Mongolia is arguably the greatest military leader of all time. The Khan regime at its peak covered over 9 million square miles of territory, which ranged from Central Asia to places as far as Poland and Korea. The reason he was able to take over this much area was largely due to the way he commanded his army, their ruthlessness, tactic, and extraordinary speed. In one example, Khan's son-in-law was killed by a stray arrow during 1221. He then took his whole army and attacked the city of Nishapur, which is modern-day Iran, and it was said that he killed everybody in the city, which is believed to be 1.75 million people, in a single hour. The victims were beheaded and their skulls were piled up in a large pyramid. His campaign would prove to be more evil than death alone, but we don't need to mention anything else. He was so cruel that even cats and dogs would also fall victim to his strength. Besides destroying entire civilization, Genghis Khan's conquest may have helped to spread the bubonic plague across Asia and Europe as well, thus killing another 75 to 200 million people. Glad to know we don't have this type of guy around today. At number 10 spot, we have Ashurnashirpal II. This man was a former king of Assyria and lived between the years 883 to 853 BC. Out of all Assyrian kings to exist, this one is by far the worst and most ruthless out of all of them, and it got to a point when he was considered the most wicked man of the ancient world. Ashurnashirpal installed the Assyrian tradition to pillage villages with no reason or warning. Unlike other cultures in the world, Assyria would not come to take over a village and have complete control. Instead, they would just invade it, then demand a tribute every time they came by. So when Ashurnashirpal reigned, the tradition carried on, but he added some steroids to it. Number 9 spot, we have Jezebel. Considered the most evil woman in history, Jezebel was the queen of the kingdom of Israel during ancient times. She was also the wife of King Ahab, who is considered to be the most evil king of Israel, but he is not on this list. So it looks like these two must be perfect for one another. In the biblical account, it said that Jezebel was the bad influence behind all of King Ahab's actions, and it got it to the point when even God himself condemned the actions of Ahab. So you already know whatever they're doing, it was bad. During her time, Jezebel would commit many acts of evil, including the search to find God's prophets and just have them executed for their beliefs. Number 8 spot, we have King Henry VIII. You know when you watch a movie or show and they are just like, I want a son to carry on my legacy? Yeah, this is the mentality that King Henry VIII had, except there was a lot more blood involved. A partner was needed for all of this to happen, but this is when King Henry's issues would arise. His first wife, Catherine of Aragon, produced 6 children with no boys, so he decided to divorce her. His next wife, Anne Boleyn, gave birth to the future Queen Elizabeth, but when she miscarried on her second baby, Henry accused her of witchcraft and had her beheaded at the Tower of London under reasons of adultery and incest. His 5th wife, Catherine Howard, also had issue with producing a male baby, so he accused her of adultery and had her beheaded. Apart from his relationship issues, as king, Henry VIII was the first English monarch to articulate the idea of divine rights of God, claiming that his authority was granted by God. Henry VIII's actions directly led to the English Civil War of the 1640s. All told, as many as 72,000 people were executed on Henry VIII's orders during the English Reformation. Number 7, Mary I of England. This lady is considered Bloody Mary, but not the children's game that you play in the mirror, but for her brutal and utmost evil reign. Born on February 18, 1516, Mary Tudor was the only child of King Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon to survive into adulthood. Remember King Henry VIII I just mentioned? Yep, this is his daughter. Although Lady Jane Grey was selected by many politicians to succeed in the throne, Mary Tudor enforced her claim to the throne. While Lady Jane awaited her coronation, Mary gathered a force in East Anglia and disposed Jane, ultimately having her beheaded. On top of that, her attempt to turn England into Roman Catholic was not a good move, and which led to burn 300 Protestants to death. Her authority caused England to lose its territory as well to the French, which was terrible back in those days. At number 6 spot, we have Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette reigned as Queen of France from 1774 to 1792. She was also the last Queen of France prior to the French Revolution. Marie Antoinette had a reputation for splurging on expensive items, and more notably, she was entangled in numerous scandals over her time alive. One of the scandals was the affair of the diamond necklace. It's said that a young lady named Countess de la Motte pretended to be the queen's friend and entered the French court in 1785. She duped a member of the high society into thinking Antoinette loved him. She even disguised an escort as the queen and convinced the man that Antoinette wanted to buy a diamond necklace. The jewelry costed 1.6 million livres at the time, which equates to nearly $12 million today. However, she is probably best known for her famous dialogue to her French subjects when they couldn't afford bread. She would go on to say, quote, "Let them eat cake," which only fueled the fire for the French Revolution, leading to her beheading. In the hump list, we have King Leopold II of Belgium. Reigning from 1865 to 1909, King Leopold II was the founder and sole owner of the Congo Free State. What this meant was that he created a separate nation from Belgium, which would be completely controlled by himself. Here, he would have the people of the Congo do forced labor in order to extract valued resources, which would all just come back to him, making him richer and richer while hundreds of lives were being lost. It went from bad to worse when Belgium officers of the public force started a reign of terror to increase production. The conditions were terrible and disease was rampant, which eventually caused about half of the Congolese population to pass away, although answers vary on the number. By 1908, world leaders couldn't ignore the atrocities going on in the Congo, and international pressure forced Leopold to transfer administration of the region out of his personal control to the Belgian government. He died a year later, escaping any sort of punishment for his actions. Number 4, we have Tamerlane the Great. If Genghis Khan had a different version of himself in another universe, Tamerlane the Great would be that guy. In the 14th century, Tamerlane was basically a land pirate taking parts of the post-destroyed Mongolian Empire all the way to cultured cities of Islam. His ruthlessness and swift action brought many evil men by his side, and eventually he would have one of the strongest armies in the world. Just like Khan, he didn't have reasonable motive other than the fact that he wanted more money and wanted his own personal glory. For example, a Persian city named Isfahan underwent one of the most brutal mass murders in history. During his reign, Tamerlane decided to march his army towards the Persian city. As he approached, the city quickly surrendered, and due to this, Tamerlane decided to save them from any sort of executions. Instead, he hired a bunch of soldiers to collect taxes from every house in the city. Eventually, some of the citizens decided to protest against these taxes, but the troops didn't take this lightly. They got into a bout, leaving all of Tamerlane's 3,000 men dead. Shocked by the act, Tamerlane took swift action and decided to order an execution of every living thing in the city, including women, children, and even animals. It said that 70,000 to 100,000 lives were lost, and the remains were left on large pyramids scattered across the city. At number 3 spot, we have Emperor Caligula. This guy was definitely the craziest Roman Empire I've ever read about. If you had a bloodthirsty tyrant and a sexual deviant, you would probably have Emperor Caligula. After being born in the year 12, he would go on to become Roman Emperor from 37 to 41 CE. When he first took authority, it was noticeable that something was terribly wrong about him. Caligula had incestual relationships with his 3 sisters and engaged in plenty of intimate group sessions during his reign. On top of that, he forced senators to bring their wives and their daughters to the palace, where he would convince them to do very inappropriate things with him and others in authority. Then, to become a full menace, Caligula would brag about his sexual performances right in front of the husbands of the women he slept with. This guy was a player, menace, and ladies' man all in one. In a pursuit for wealth, he would stage trials of innocent people in order to confiscate their estates, while he gained large quantities of money and luxuries for himself. Eventually, things started to go bad, and I mean bad. However, the last straw was after famine and bankruptcy hit. It was here where he planned to move to Egypt to live as a sun god. This eventually triggered his murder in January 41 AD. Number 2, Vlad the Impaler. First of all, he is responsible for the deaths of around 80,000 people, but historians push that number above 100,000 people. Out of all these people, he apparently impaled 20,000 of them. No wonder he got the name. Many people have him as an inspiration for Dracula for his bloodthirsty ways. For example, after his family passed away, he decided to hold a banquet and invite hundreds of members of his rival families. So when he had them all over, he had them all stabbed and their still twitching bodies were impaled on spikes. Another time, when he retreated from a battle, he ordered 20,000 defeated Ottomans to be impaled on wooden stakes. This was such a horrifying sight that when the Sultan Mehmed II saw the lines of bodies, he quickly retreated back to Constantinople. Regardless of his bloodthirsty motives, he remains a national hero in Romania. His victorious campaigns against Ottoman forces, which protected both Wallachia and Europe, has won him praise as a military leader. So good or bad, he did kill a lot of people, but then again, they were brutally impaled. At number 1 spot, we have Queen Ranavalova. I had to save up one of the most murderous leaders for last, so introducing the former Queen of Madagascar, Ranavalova I. She reigned for a total of 33 years from 1828 to 1862, and let me tell you, not one of those years was a good year in Madagascar. Ranavalova was a very anxious and paranoid person in general, and when you're in a position that high with that much paranoia, chances are you think someone is plotting your demise. So what did this queen do? She would test her subjects by trial by ordeal, which consisted of giving a person tangina poison, which came from one of Madagascar's native trees. After, she would feed them 3 pieces of chicken skin, and only if the person had vomited all 3 pieces would they be considered innocent. This would mean that if anyone had only vomited 1 or 2 pieces, or even passed away, they would be considered guilty. You would think this trial would be uncommon and made for those who truly deserved it, but no. In 1838 alone, the queen had hundreds of thousands of people undergoing the trial, which ended up claiming the lives of over 100,000 people, which amounted to 75% of their population at the time. On top of that, the queen was very open on her anti-Christian views and would expel or execute any European missionaries coming to the island. This is only the surface of what she did. Others included forced labor and many other disputes with her family members. But maybe that's for a full video. I don't know. Let us know in the comments.